There's a reason why we call it spirits. A reason that has nothing to do with bar menus or cocktail lists, and everything to do with ancient mysticism, alchemy, and the nature of reality itself. The bottle sitting on a shelf in your kitchen, the wine passed around at a celebration, the liquid poured in silent grief. All of it holds a forgotten secret, not just of chemistry, but of the soul. And that secret is what we'll discover today. The truth behind alcohol. At first glance, alcohol seems simple. A drink, a pleasure, a tradition. But hidden beneath that glass lies a story that stretches back to the desert sands of Arabia, to the dark halls of medieval alchemists, and even further, to the heart of spiritual transformation. To uncover this hidden truth, you have to go deeper than biology or behavior. You have to look into the word itself, alcohol. In Arabic, alcohol originally referred not to a liquid, but to a fine black powder, antimony sulfide, ground and used as eyeliner. You might know it by another name, kohl. This substance was believed to purify vision, not just literally by sharpening eyesight, but symbolically. It was said to allow one to see through illusions, to pierce the veil between appearances and deeper truths. Over time, the meaning of alcohol began to shift. Alchemists, who worked not only with matter but with the spirit, used the term to describe the subtle essence extracted from substances through the process of distillation. This essence, this purified and concentrated form, was seen as holding the true soul of the substance. It was the invisible made manifest. Distillation became a sacred act. It mirrored the journey of the soul, separating the pure from the impure, the subtle from the gross, the light from the heavy. Just as heat separates alcohol from fermented mash, spiritual practice separates wisdom from distraction. Meditation, prayer, hardship, surrender, all of these are forms of distillation. They burn away the unnecessary, leaving behind something refined, something whole. In this way, alcohol is deeply alchemical. It is a product of fire, of transformation. It is, in its original meaning, a spirit, captured and bottled. But here lies the paradox. What began as a symbol of clarity and purification, of inner transformation, slowly became something else, something more dangerous. Because when that distilled essence, the spirit, was removed from its sacred context, it no longer pointed the way toward enlightenment. Instead, it began to mimic it. Alcohol, when used without awareness, offers the illusion of transformation. It makes us feel elevated. It quiets the thinking mind. It opens us up, temporarily, to emotion, to memory, to visions. It relaxes the ego's grip. For a moment, we feel freer, looser, more ourselves. In spiritual terms, these are the effects people seek through meditation or fasting. But the path of the spirit is meant to be earned, slowly, through discipline and awakening. When alcohol offers these states without the work, it can lead us astray. It becomes a shortcut. But every shortcut has a price. In many ancient traditions, there are warnings about false openings of the spirit. In Taoism, for example, there are teachings about energies that rise too quickly without guidance, leading to spiritual confusion or even illness. In some African traditions, especially among the Yoruba, there is the idea of Asha, spiritual life force, that can be misused or unbalanced if not treated with respect. Alcohol was sometimes used in rituals, but only with intention, only when the spirits permitted. The problem isn't alcohol itself. It is the way we've forgotten its origin, forgotten its purpose. When used with reverence, alcohol can still serve as a doorway. Think of the way wine is used in communion, or how mead was used in Viking rituals to communicate with the gods. In small, sacred amounts, it can shift consciousness, soften the veil, allow a glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. But when it becomes just another escape, another form of numbing, it turns from gateway to prison. This is the tragedy and the mystery of alcohol. It holds power. It reflects our own longing for transcendence. But if we're not careful, it replaces the real thing with a pale imitation. It becomes a mask rather than a mirror. And perhaps this is why they call it spirits. Because deep down, we remember that alcohol once had a soul. We remember that it was a sacred substance, a bridge between worlds, and maybe, even now, it still holds that potential. But only if we remember. Only if we bring intention back to the ritual. Only if we reclaim what was lost. So the next time you hold a glass of wine or walk past a liquor store window, pause. Ask yourself, not with judgment, but with honesty, what am I really seeking? Is it joy? Is it peace? Is it a connection to something greater? Because the bottle might promise all those things, and for a moment it might even deliver. But true transformation is not found in the drink. It's found in what the drink was once meant to symbolize. The soul's fire, the sacred burn, the refining of the self. And that's where our journey begins. The alchemist's fire, distillation as a spiritual map. We turn back to the quiet chambers of ancient alchemists, where glass vessels shimmered and flames danced beneath them. A sacred process unfolded, distillation. To the untrained eye, it was merely a method to purify substances. But to the alchemist, it was a mirror of the soul's journey, a path from the mundane to the divine. Consider Zosimos of Panopolis, a 3rd century alchemist and mystic. He described alchemy as the art of drawing the spirits from bodies and bonding the spirits within bodies. For Zosimos, the laboratory was not just a place of chemical reactions. It was a sanctuary where the transformation of metals paralleled the transformation of the self. In the process of distillation, a substance is heated until it becomes vapor, leaving behind impurities. This vapor is then cooled and condensed back into a purified liquid. Alchemists saw this as a metaphor for spiritual purification. The soul, burdened by worldly impurities, must undergo trials, the heat, to rise above and return to its pure essence. In the process of distillation, a substance is heated until it becomes vapor, leaving behind all that is heavy and impure. What remains is essence, refined, clean, reborn. To the ancient alchemists, this was never just chemistry, it was a sacred image of the soul's journey. They believed that just as water rises in vapor, we too must rise. But only after facing the flame. This was never meant to be easy. In fact, the heat is the point. Distillation is discomfort. It is pressure. It is the loss of identity. The same way a liquid loses its shape when it becomes steam, the soul in transformation must let go of everything that once defined it. Old habits, false beliefs, broken patterns. Carl Jung, who studied both alchemy and the human psyche, saw this clearly. He believed that alchemy mirrored our deepest psychological processes. In his view, every stage of alchemical transformation, from breaking down matter to refining it, symbolized the stages of human growth. Distillation, especially, was the turning point, the moment when clarity begins to emerge. But this isn't just ancient philosophy. Modern psychology has backed it up. One famous study that echoes this concept is the white bear experiment by Daniel Wegner in 1987. In the experiment, participants were told not to think of a white bear, and predictably, they couldn't stop thinking about it. The harder they tried to suppress the image, the more it returned. Why does this matter? Because this is what many of us do with emotional pain, fear, or desire. We push it down, pretend it's not there. We numb it with distractions, substances, even alcohol. But like vapor trapped under a lid, pressure builds. Suppression is not purification, it's stagnation. Wegener's study shows that avoidance only strengthens what we try to ignore. True healing, true distillation, requires us to face what burns. We must heat the soul, bring unconscious pain into conscious awareness. Let the heat rise, let the illusions boil away. Then, and only then, something new begins. The ancient alchemists called this vapor the spirit. It is no coincidence that the word for hard liquor is still spirits, but what they were after wasn't drunkenness. It was the essence, the truth hidden within matter. The same way the self hides beneath trauma, beneath ego, beneath the roles we play. In psychological terms, distillation is like integration, a concept Carl Jung explored in his idea of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole. This doesn't happen by escaping discomfort. It happens by staying in it, watching it, learning from it. Much like the vapor must cool and return as something new, we too must return, not to what we were, but to something purer, the self refined by awareness. Not the false self we build to protect ourselves, but the real self waiting beneath it all. Today, many are returning to this idea, though they may not call it alchemy. Practices like mindfulness, somatic therapy, trauma healing, breathwork, and even cold exposure work on the same principle. Stay with the discomfort, breathe through the heat, rise above the noise, and allow what's real to remain. We are not meant to stay in the fire forever, but we are meant to go through it. The body trembles, the ego resists, the heart breaks open, but if we trust the process, we become something else entirely. The ancient alchemists believed that once the soul was distilled, refined by heat and cooled by stillness, it would begin to shine. Not in a loud way, not in a way that others can always see, but in the quiet, steady glow of someone who has burned away what is false and come home to what is real. Cleopatra the alchemist, another revered figure, emphasized the importance of intention and purity in this process. She believed that the alchemist's own spiritual state influenced the outcome of their work. In her writings, she often used imagery of conception and birth, symbolizing the rebirth of the soul through alchemical transformation. The emerald tablet, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, encapsulates this philosophy with the phrase, "as above, so below." This suggests that the processes in the heavens are reflected on earth and vice versa. In alchemical terms, the transformation of substances in the lab mirrors the transformation of the spirit. In the context of alcohol or alcohol, this transformation takes on a profound significance. Originally referring to a fine powder used to purify vision, the term evolved to denote the distilled essence of substances. This essence, when consumed, was believed to offer not just physical effects, but spiritual insights. Purify matter, and you'll purify the self. In true alchemy, distillation isn't just chemistry, it's a metaphor. Alchemists believed that by purifying matter, they could also purify the self. By refining a substance again and again, they believed they were mimicking the soul's journey from heavy, confused, and earthbound to clear, light, and connected to something greater. The goal wasn't escape, it was elevation. The essence they sought wasn't a substance, it was awareness. It was a state of consciousness so pure that it could see through illusion and perceive truth directly. But today we've flipped that process upside down. The states alcohol brings on can feel profound. People laugh more, they cry more, they say what's been buried. But this release is temporary. It's like steam escaping from a pressure valve, not transformation, but momentary relief. In contrast, ancient spiritual practices like prayer, fasting, breathwork, and deep meditation don't just release the pressure. They change the container. They change you from the inside out. Spiritual traditions across cultures, from Sufis to Gnostics to early Christian mystics, understood that the soul is like a flame, a flicker of divine fire within us, always reaching, always yearning to reunite with its source. This flame is delicate. It feeds on stillness, truth, and intention. But alcohol, by its very nature, creates smoke. It clouds the light. It interrupts the signal. In energetic terms, many mystics describe the body as vibrating at certain frequencies. Higher emotions, love, gratitude, peace, resonate with lightness and clarity. Lower ones, fear, anger, guilt, drag the spirit downward. Alcohol, despite its ancient power, often drags us down when used carelessly. It slows the vibration of the mind and body, making it harder for the soul to reach those finer, higher realms where spiritual insight lives. In that lowered state, something strange happens. We feel disconnected, but we think we've expanded. We feel free, but we're just unanchored, like a balloon cut loose from a child's hand, drifting not toward the heavens but simply lost. And this illusion is dangerous, because for a moment it does feel like transcendence. The ego loosens, time slows, thoughts stretch into strange shapes. But this is not the clean, clear insight of meditation. It's not the radiant quiet of prayer. It's not the expansion of the third eye opening like a lotus in the dark. It's a simulation, a spiritual counterfeit that mimics the outer signs of awakening without the inner shift. This is why mystics across time warned of false doors. One such warning comes from the teachings of the Essenes, a mystical sect believed to have lived in ancient Judea. They taught that the body is a temple and the mind is its altar. Anything that pollutes the temple dulls the voice of God within. The pineal gland, what many now call the third eye, was thought to be the lamp inside this temple, shining light on both the seen and unseen worlds. Modern science has confirmed something curious. Alcohol impacts the pineal gland, not just once, but especially with repeated use. This small gland, tucked deep in the center of the brain, plays a major role in regulating sleep, circadian rhythm, and certain hormones. But in mystical traditions, it does something more. It's believed to be the gateway to intuition, to dreams, and to spiritual perception. When we regularly consume alcohol, we slowly shut this gateway. The dreams become fuzzier, the inner guidance becomes harder to hear. The sense of knowing that lives beyond words begins to dim, not because the soul has gone silent, but because we've built a wall of fog between us and the voice within. This is not about shame. This is about awareness. The ancient world didn't view substances as bad or good. They were seen as tools. Like fire, they could warm or destroy. Like water, they could cleanse or drown. The key was intention, purity, and respect. When used in sacred ways, even strong elixirs could unlock states of ecstasy and insight. But used without grounding, they could lead the soul astray. The difference lies in preparation. When a person trains their mind through silence, strengthens their body through discipline, and clears their heart through compassion, they become a vessel worthy of the sacred. Then, even a small sip of wine could become a key. But without that preparation, the same sip becomes an anchor. The real power of alcohol was never in the drink itself, but in the awareness it was meant to support. It was a mirror, not a master, a flame, not a firestorm. However, over time, the sacredness of this practice diminished. Alcohol became a means of escape rather than enlightenment. The ritualistic aspect was lost, and with it, the understanding of its potential to aid in spiritual growth. The problem today is not that people drink, it's that people forget. Forget that spirit once meant more than the bottle. Forget that the body is a temple, not a tavern. Forget that the goal of all spiritual work is union, not just with something outside of us, but with what's already inside. Today, alcohol is often seen as a way to numb, to forget, to blur the edges of a life that feels too sharp or too heavy. It's something people turn to after work, at celebrations, during heartbreaks, and even in boredom. But the soul does not need escape. It needs remembrance. And maybe, just maybe, the original purpose of spirits wasn't to help us forget, but to help us remember. To taste, even briefly, the fire we already carry. To see for a moment beyond the walls of our daily life and recall that we are more than bodies. We are light, we are consciousness, we are connection. In the next part, we'll explore how the ancient priesthoods, especially in Egypt and Mesopotamia, used fermentation and distillation not just to create potions, but to encode spiritual truths. We'll look at their rituals, their symbolism, and what it means that even they called these drinks spirits. Because what if the word itself was always trying to tell us something? The shadow gate. To understand what we've lost, it helps to look at a nearly forgotten belief from the pre-Islamic Middle East, specifically the mystical sects that believed certain substances, when prepared correctly, could open what they called the shadow gate. This gate wasn't a physical door, but a threshold in consciousness. It was said to exist between waking and dream states, and those who crossed it could speak to spirits, receive visions, and even gain knowledge that didn't come from books, but from somewhere deeper, what some today might call the collective unconscious, or the Akashic field. The initiates of this practice didn't drink for fun. They drank in silence. They drank while meditating, while chanting low prayers, or sitting in total darkness. And the drink wasn't just alcohol. It was carefully distilled with herbs, minerals, and sometimes even ashes of sacred plants. The goal wasn't intoxication. The goal was expansion. One obscure text, referred to by modern researchers as the veil of the grey flame, describes how the preparation of these substances was meant to mirror the inner preparation of the soul. He who has not first distilled the bitterness from his own heart, the text says, should not drink of the elixir, lest the spirits show him only what he already is. In other words, if your heart was full of anger, fear, or confusion, those emotions would be magnified. But if you approached the spirit with peace and respect, it would lift the veil. This idea that alcohol can reflect or even magnify your inner state is not just a poetic metaphor. It's something modern psychology has echoed. Carl Jung, for example, warned of what he called unearned wisdom, spiritual experiences people seek without proper grounding. He believed that trying to reach the divine too quickly or without inner work could be dangerous. It's no coincidence that Jung compared the alchemical process to the individuation of the soul. He saw the alchemist's fire as a map for human transformation. But what happens when this fire is used carelessly? When it becomes just a way to escape rather than evolve? That's where we are today. The alcohol most people consume is stripped of its ritual. There's no preparation, no reflection, no intention. The shadow gate is still there, but we don't see it anymore. We pass through it without knowing. And because we're unprepared, what could have been a revelation becomes confusion, sadness, or even addiction. In many traditional cultures, this is still understood. Among some West African tribes, for example, there's a belief that alcohol is a spirit mirror. In certain initiation rites, a small amount of distilled palm wine is offered to the ancestors before being drunk. The idea is that the ancestors, who live just on the other side of the veil, can speak through the spirit of the drink, but they only speak if they're invited with respect. If not, they remain silent. or worse, they bring chaos. This idea that the spirit of alcohol can bring either clarity or chaos depending on how it's used is ancient but not outdated, and perhaps, now more than ever, we need to remember it. We live in a time where everything sacred has been made casual. Sacred words have become slogans. Sacred substances have become products, and the sacred self, the deeper soul inside us, has been buried under distractions. But alcohol, if used with care, can still be a doorway. It begins with remembering that everything distilled, everything purified, is meant to reveal something. In alchemy, this was the whole point, to strip away what was impure, what was heavy, until only the essence remained. And the essence, they believed, was divine. Imagine this. You sit alone in a quiet room. You hold a small glass of wine or a drop of a clear spirit. Before drinking, you pause. You set an intention. You ask yourself, what do I want to see? You breathe slowly. You close your eyes. You taste, not to forget, but to remember. Not to escape, but to enter. You are walking the same path the ancients did. You're using fire not to destroy, but to transform. You're inviting the sacred back into a world that's forgotten how to recognize it. This doesn't mean alcohol is the only way, or even the best way. It's simply one way, one mirror, one symbol of something deeper that lives in all things, this longing to become whole again, this longing to rise like vapor and return to something pure. It is not a path for everyone, but for those who feel called to remember, called to look beyond the bottle and into the fire that made it. There are lessons still hidden in the old ways. The teachings aren't gone, they're just buried. But like all truths, they wait patiently. They wait for the right question, the right moment, the right soul to ask, what was this meant to be? And when that question is asked, not from a place of shame, but of curiosity, the spirit answers, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the flicker of a memory long forgotten, but it answers. Power of drunkenness. Throughout history, various cultures and notable figures have explored the use of intoxicating substances as a means to enhance spiritual experiences and connect with the divine. These practices, often rooted in ritual and symbolism, reveal a complex relationship between altered states of consciousness and spiritual enlightenment. In many cultures, including the Greek, Egyptian, and Vedic traditions, intoxicants were once used under strict ceremonial circumstances. Priests and oracles drank or inhaled mind-altering substances not to escape, but to see more clearly. They believed that intoxication, done correctly and with proper intention, could dissolve the boundary between human and divine. The veil would lift. In ancient Egypt, for instance, the festival of drunkenness was a significant ritual dedicated to the goddess Hathor. Participants consumed large quantities of alcohol to achieve a state of ecstasy, believing it brought them closer to the divine. This ritualistic intoxication was not merely for pleasure, but was deeply embedded in their spiritual practices. Similarly, the ancient Greeks held the Eleusinian mysteries, secretive ceremonies honoring Demeter and Persephone. While the exact details remain unknown, it's believed that participants consumed a special potion called kykeon, which may have contained psychoactive substances. This beverage was thought to facilitate visions and profound spiritual insights. In the realm of philosophy, figures like Charles Baudelaire viewed intoxication as a pathway to transcendence. He believed that altering one's state of consciousness could lead to new perspectives and a deeper understanding of beauty and truth. These historical examples illustrate that when approached with reverence and purpose, intoxicating substances have been used as tools for spiritual growth and enlightenment. They served as catalysts for individuals and communities to explore the mysteries of existence and connect with higher realms of consciousness. However, we need to recognize that the context and intention behind the use of such substances play a crucial role in their impact. Without the framework of ritual and spiritual guidance, the use of intoxicants can lead to escapism rather than enlightenment. The challenge lies in discerning the fine line between using these substances as sacred tools and falling into patterns of misuse. In modern times, there's a resurgence of interest in the spiritual applications of certain substances, particularly in controlled settings like guided psychedelic therapy. These contemporary practices echo ancient traditions, emphasizing the importance of intention, setting, and guidance in facilitating meaningful spiritual experiences. Ultimately, the historical use of intoxicants in spiritual contexts underscores humanity's enduring quest to transcend ordinary consciousness and connect with the divine. At the heart of every longing, every craving, every reach for a glass, there is a deeper yearning, not just for relaxation, not just to silence the mind, but for something far more ancient and powerful, to reconnect with the divine. The real reason alcohol has stayed with us for thousands of years isn't just because it's intoxicating. It's because somewhere, deep inside, we remember what it once meant. It was never just a drink. It was a symbol, a ritual, a sacred substance used by those who wanted to go beyond the veil of the everyday and glimpse something eternal. In temples, in caves, in secret halls, mystics and seekers sat around fires or altars, not to numb their senses but to sharpen them, to unlock the doors between this world and the one just behind it. For example, in the Vedas, the sacred texts of ancient India, there is mention of a mysterious drink called soma. This divine elixir was said to grant immortality, insight, and union with the gods. It wasn't taken lightly. It was revered, honored, and used only during sacred rituals. Why else would people across all times, places, and beliefs reach for something that alters the mind? What are we trying to touch when we loosen our thoughts and let the ego slip away? Why do we find comfort in the warmth of a drink, the slowing of time, the loosening of the tongue? A great story to illustrate this took place in 1789. The year was 1789. The French Revolution had begun, and with it, the world would change forever. But in the middle of the chaos, politics, war, and rebellion, there was something else happening, something hidden under the surface. France at the time was full of pain. The people were starving. The rich held power. The church controlled belief. The old ways were collapsing, and a deep emptiness was spreading through the land. Many turned to alcohol. Wine, once used in sacred rites, had become a daily escape. Taverns were packed. Bottles replaced prayer. But underneath the drinking, something else stirred. The desire for truth. And in that hunger, a strange movement rose. They were called the Illuminés of Avignon, a small spiritual group who believed the world was falling apart because it had forgotten the sacred. They didn't believe in escaping through drinking. They believed in purifying the soul. They practiced silence, discipline, and meditation. They said the light of God could return, not through power or wealth, but through inner transformation. They followed older, forgotten teachings, mixing ideas from Christian mystics, Hermetic texts, and alchemical writings. Their leader, Dom Pernetti, had studied the Emerald Tablet and believed that the real elixir of life was not found in any bottle. It was found through spiritual work, through union with the divine within. At the time, people laughed at them. Some called them mad, others feared them. But in the shadows of revolution they stood firm. No temples, no weapons, just a belief that the soul could shine again, even in the darkest of times. They were eventually silenced. History did not celebrate them, but their message remains. It reminds us that even when the world is falling apart, even when people lose their way and sacred things are misused, there will always be those who remember. Those who choose stillness over noise, discipline over distraction, remembrance over intoxication. The Illuminates believed that true change had to start inside, and maybe they were right. Maybe real revolutions don't begin in the streets, maybe they begin in the heart. And maybe you, right now, are part of that same quiet uprising, an awakening not of anger or escape, but of devotion, clarity, and light. A remembering of what we were always meant to be. A flame, not a flicker. A soul, not a shadow. The truth, not the imitation. And so the final question is not about history, it's about now. Will you walk the old path, lit by ancient wisdom, cleared by discipline, guided by devotion, and find the wine that never dries, the real wine, the divine, still waiting within you? Even in today's most casual moments, at a party, around a dinner table, even alone on a quiet evening, there is a hidden prayer whispered between sips. Let me forget my suffering. Let me feel joy again. Let me remember who I am. But true spiritual paths don't offer escape. They offer return. Return to the self. Return to source. In Buddhist philosophy, this desire to reach something beyond is seen in the wheel of samsara, the cycle of craving and suffering. We want something more. We chase temporary highs. We fall, we repeat, and unless we wake up, we stay trapped. Alcohol mimics the taste of freedom, but only meditation, prayer, devotion, and true surrender give us the real thing. Still, that doesn't mean alcohol must always be a villain. In some mystical teachings, even the shadow has a lesson. Even the illusion points back to truth. The poet Rumi once wrote, "I drink no ordinary wine, but wine of the soul, from the tavern of silence." Here he speaks of intoxication, not as a worldly addiction, but as spiritual ecstasy, a state reached through love, surrender, and inner stillness. The wine he praises is not from a bottle, but from union with the beloved, God, the universe, the source. The ancient Sufi mystics often use the language of drunkenness to describe the loss of ego that happens when one merges with the divine. They would dance, chant, spin, and weep. And yes, some drank, but not always literally. Many used wine as a symbol of the overwhelming sweetness of God's presence, a sweetness that makes the soul forget the world. So perhaps the question is not, should we drink or not, but rather, what are we really thirsty for? When we drink from the world, we are never satisfied. One glass becomes two. One night becomes a habit. But when we drink from the well of spirit, even one drop can change us forever. If you've ever felt that moment after a drink, when your mind goes quiet and your heart feels open, then you've tasted a glimpse of what many seekers try to reach through spiritual discipline. But the danger is in stopping there. The trap is believing that the drink caused that peace, when in fact it only covered the noise. The real peace is already inside you. The real intoxication comes not from forgetting, but from remembering. Remembering who you are. Remembering where you come from. Remembering the divine spark that lives in you, right now, whether you're sober or not. The journey back to this inner light doesn't require you to reject all pleasures, but it does ask you to be honest, to ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to truth or pulling me further away? Wine of devotion. This takes us to reality. In a world where everything moves fast, where screens glow day and night and silence feels like a stranger, something unexpected is happening. People are waking up, not all at once, not in crowds, not with loud announcements, but quietly, steadily, and with a hunger that no substance can satisfy. There's a stirring inside many hearts, a deep question that rises in the still moments. Is this all there is? And from that question, a journey begins. All across the world, people are turning away from the artificial high and towards something ancient and real. They are leaving behind empty escapes and walking paths once lit by sages, mystics, and saints. They are not chasing intoxication anymore. They're searching for clarity. Not distraction, but direction. Not forgetfulness, but remembrance. Because the truth is, something in us remembers. We remember that there was once a way to feel connected, not just to others, but to the whole universe. A way to wake up every day and feel guided, protected, aligned. There are echoes of this knowledge in every tradition, in the yogi sitting beneath the tree, in the monk chanting before sunrise, in the Sufi spinning under the stars. There is no alcohol in their temples, no intoxication in their devotion, but there is ecstasy, and it's deeper than any bottle could ever give. The ancients knew something that the modern world forgot. True elevation doesn't come from adding more, but from removing the layers that block our light. In the Vedic tradition, the word tapas means heat or inner fire. It refers to the burn of discipline, the kind that melts away illusions. It's not easy, but it's pure, and it's powerful. The Buddhists speak of the middle way, a path between indulgence and denial, where wisdom grows and suffering fades. It's not about avoiding life, but about seeing through its games. Mystics like Rumi wrote of a wine that doesn't come from grapes, but from love itself. "I got drunk on the wine of love," he said. "Such intoxication is beyond explanation." And today, these teachings are finding new voices. You see it in the woman who wakes at dawn, not to check her phone, but to sit in silence, letting her breath lead her to the divine. You see it in the man who used to numb his pain with drink, now fasting during the full moon, chanting names older than language. You see it in the artists painting mandalas, the children singing mantras, the elders returning to sacred texts with tears in their eyes. These are not fantasies, these are facts. It's happening now. Even in the middle of city noise and endless deadlines, people are reclaiming the real work, the inner work. They are turning everyday life into a spiritual practice. They are waking up not by accident, but by effort, by intention, by surrender, because something inside us knows we were made to rise. And no substance, no matter how ancient, no matter how sacred its roots, can take us there unless the intention is pure. That's what the old alchemists were trying to teach. That's why the early uses of alcohol weren't for escape, but for sacred contact. It was ritual, controlled, contained, surrounded by prayers, symbols, silence. It was meant to open a doorway to the divine, not replace it. But once the ritual was lost, so was the meaning. Now modern seekers are bringing the ritual back, not through drinking, but through devotion. They light candles with intention. They write prayers in journals. They walk barefoot on the earth to remember what it feels like to be real. They speak affirmations, but more importantly, they listen. Because divine remembrance isn't just about talking to something greater, it's about being with it. And here's the secret that's often forgotten. You don't need to go far to find the divine. You don't need to travel to a mountaintop or visit a holy site. You only need to go inward. The temple is inside you, always has been. But like any sacred space, it gets dusty, covered in doubt, pain, fear, distraction. And so, instead of reaching for something outside of yourself, you must begin to clear it out. Slowly, gently, with daily practice. That's what devotion is. Devotion is choosing every day to remember, to return, to reconnect. Whether through prayer, meditation, chanting, dance, or even mindful silence, it's a bridge back to your source. It's not performance, it's not perfection, it's presence. And in that presence, something begins to shift. You begin to notice that the things you used to chase no longer satisfy. You begin to see through the illusions you once believed. You begin to feel guided, not by outside voices, but by the whisper of your own soul. That's how awakening begins, not in a flash of lightning, but in the gentle cracking of the old shell, in the quiet moment when you say, "There must be more than this," and start walking a different way. Even now, in the age of algorithms, chaos and convenience, it is possible to awaken. It is possible to feel the divine move through you, to drink from a higher source, to become so full of peace that you no longer crave escape. You no longer need to be distracted because you've finally remembered what it means to be here. This is not theory, this is a living truth, and you are invited into it. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know everything. You just need to begin. One breath, one intention, one step. Because the flame is still burning, the ancient path still exists, and the real wine still waits, quiet, patient, eternal. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.